So this is my spell book. What do we know about wizards and witches and sorcerers and the like? They always have these big, fat wooden tables, usually with like a skull on it. Maybe it's a skull candle. Maybe they have a quill. Potions. Oh, yeah, got to have some potions. So we need like a big, fat wooden desk. So let's get goofy. Let's put a big old hunk of wood here. Yeah, wood. You could just Google like wood background image. Looks like somebody already did. Huh. How about that? So you can do that. Find one you like. Hopefully you'll find some licensing terms that means you're not stealing it and you're actually allowed to copy it. That'd be nice. I have hunted one down already. Let's see here. How's the easiest way for me to share this? Let's do it like so. I'm going to paste the link into Slack. Session 2 morning. Here's a link to this this wood image. It's kind of big. So download that there. Remember, from the terminal, you could always open up the folder where your project is by saying open space dot on Mac or start space dot on Windows. You can also go into Visual Studio Code, right-click on the file name, and say Reveal in Finder or Reveal in Explorer. It'll open it up right there. So I could drag the image in here. So now I've got wood.jpg. And I want this to be the background for my whole thing. There is predictably a CSS property called background image. For the value, you put URL, parentheses, and the URL of your image. Since our image is in the same folder as our CSS, I can just put wood.jpg. Let's see how that looks. Well, it's there. That's really, really big. Oh, man. I should have known that would happen. Let's tweak that a little. Let's tweak that, and let's try to get it to stop freaking out. Gosh. Okay. There are all kinds of things you can do with background images. Some of these things are fairly new. By the way, I meant to show you earlier a site called Can I Use? I think it's just caniuse.com. Caniuse.com. Can I use, what was it? Placeholder. How about that? Placeholder. Looks like, gosh dang, not even IEL. What? That's not true. Oh, placeholder shown CSS pseudo class. Okay, that doesn't work. Placeholder CSS pseudo element. That works. Looks like kind of in IE11. Partial support. Input placeholder attribute. That's what we were actually interested in, right? It does work in IE11. It works in every version of Edge. It's green all the way across. We're good. 97.29%. So what else can we do with a background image? How about background size? Specifies the size of the background images. Works in Edge, Firefox 4, Safari 4.1, Chrome, IE9, Opera 10. Do you guys all get this? I'm pretty sure this is because I have a plugin for this. Do you guys see that kind of detail? If you type background size, does it tell you all this stuff? Including browser support. Okay, so I have an extension called Can I Use, which is pretty awesome. Compatibility check for this stuff. So it'll tell you right there in your editor what browsers support this. So everything from IE9 and newer. Background size, let's say cover. Scale the image while preserving its intrinsic aspect ratio, if any, to the smallest size, such that both its width and its height can completely cover the background positioning area. So in other words, don't stretch it, don't squish it, don't do any of that stuff. Don't change the aspect ratio. And make it as small as possible while still covering both the width and the height completely. Refresh the page after doing that, and it's a little different. It also repeats, and the repeat is kind of ugly. So, sure enough, there is a background repeat. With all these values. How about no repeat? Don't forget semicolons after every CSS property and value. Refresh that. Cool. But it doesn't fill the whole thing anymore. Why not?
Use fill instead of cover.
Fill? Let me get it to tell me about it. Oh, come on, you. Why isn't it telling me anything? Cover, it's telling me things. I don't know. I'm not sure that's quite what I want. Maybe if I... Why isn't it doing it what I want? What if I do a background attachment fixed? So background attachment fixed will make it not scroll with the page. That's all it should do. I don't know. Okay, that did it. Background attachment fixed. So here we are. I'll copy and paste this CSS into Slack so you don't have to work too hard to keep up with it. Also, there's some padding and margin already on the body of the page. If I highlight body in my Elements tab here, look down here, I can see all the CSS rules that apply to body. There's all my CSS. I can also see, oh my gosh, come on. I may need to find a smaller background image if that's the reason it's doing this. I don't know. Oh my gosh, come on. Pewter, what you doing? Ah! Thank you. Hey, look. Scroll down enough, you see the box model here. And I can see the margin and padding and border and stuff on my body. My body has some margin. I don't want that. So I'm going to say margin 0. If I don't want things to hug the edge, I'll figure that out another way. I could put some margin on the left if I really wanted to. It looks like my H1 has so much margin around it on the top and bottom that it's way down on the page. Here's what I'm thinking. This black on brown, not super duper readable, and just not cool. You could change it. Let's make a rule for the H1. We could do color white if we wanted. Color colon white, yeah. So you can specify colors in a lot of different formats. There are a whole bunch of named colors. All kind of the stuff you would expect. There's like dark gray, light gray, medium gray, stuff like that. There's off-the-wall stuff like cornflower blue, which doesn't look great against the wood. It's a nice color, but... Or the most common way probably is to use red, green, blue values using hexadecimal codes. So it'll look like a series of 6 hexadecimal numbers. You know what hexadecimal is? 0 through 15, basically. A, B, C, D, E, F for 10 through 15. Base 16 number system. So if you have 2 digits in hexadecimal, that's 256 possible values, right? 0 through 255. So for RGB, for each RGB, you have 2 values. Specify that you're doing a hex number by saying hash. So your R value, 0 through 15. So FF, that would be 255 for red. 0 for green, 0 for blue, and I get a bright red. Go all the way up with blue, I get violet or magenta or whatever. Violet, I suppose. Go all the way on green, I get yellow. All the way on all of them, I get white. 0 for all of them, I get black, etc. If all 6 numbers are the same, you're always going to get a gray. You might start to get used to what some of the colors you like are. You can also use actual numbers, 0 through 255. And you can specify transparency by adding an extra value there. Say RGBA, red, green, blue, alpha. Add an alpha channel. So I could say 0.4. And you'll see it's kind of transparent. 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. So that's between 0 and 1. You use decimals. Use percentages, basically. We can stick with white for the moment. Looks nice enough. Let's get a nice, fancy font for our H1. I looked some up yesterday. There's a couple that begin Unifractor. We have Unifractor Magruntia and Unifractor Cook. Those look like wizard fonts, don't they? I like Unifractor Cook. Let's check it out. Now I have 2 font families selected. My import statement just changed. Looks like it added a vertical bar with my new font, and it specified the weight 700 for that. I can just recopy this entire import statement. Now I have Open Sans and whatever the heck this thing is. And that's the name of the font right there, so I could say font family. That. Failing to find that, let's just use any old serif font. Why not? Oh man, so medieval, y'all. Yeah, it looks like an F. Yeah, Spellboof or Guspellboof or something. It's kind of like public library, right? Or that band Churches, right? Back in the day when letters looked like other letters. If you even look at stuff like from like the American Revolution, their S's and F's have these. Their S's kind of look like big F's with a little cross through the middle. Kind of looks like a funny spelling, but it's actually just a different way of writing those letters. So we can do all kinds of other fancy stuff. Our spells should probably be on some nice piece of old ancient parchment. How about it? Let's find you another link to put in Dropbox. Here you go. Here's another link you can download. Want to put a skull on your desk so everyone knows you're either a wizard or in a metal band or something? Sure, why not? Yeah, but what if you've got like a spirit friend who has no corporeal body and needs some place to hang out, so he hangs out inside a skull, and like the eyes light up when he talks. Happens all the time. It's really very common. So let's get that stuff over here. Oh man, you need a quill too, don't you? Let's get you a quill. Got a quill. Got some parchment. Got ourselves a skull. And let's get ourselves a whole lot of CSS going on. Oh yeah. We got our spell boof. Here's something else I want to do. I added in a bunch of CSS. I'm going to paste it all in Slack. But this CSS assumes that I've made my markup a certain way. Let's see. How does it want my markup? I need the skull and the quill on the page. So I'm just going to put them kind of at the top here before my H1. That would be img, right? Image source equals skull dot ping. Alt attribute, it's a good idea to at least have an empty string there. That is what a screen reader will read in place of this thing. The skull is purely decorative. It's not helpful to someone with the screen reader to read the word skull, so I'm going to leave it an empty string. And I'll give it an ID of skull as well. I'll do the same with quill. Quill.ping ID equals quill. I've got my H1. I've got my form. I've got my UL. I'm going to wrap my UL in another element. I'm going to make it a main element. That's an HTML5 element. It behaves just like a div. It's just a generic block level element, but it has some semantic meaning. This is the main body of my page, so I like that better than div. So I'm going to put main there, and I'll just put my UL inside there. And with the CSS, I paste it in there. Now I get this. Got my spirit friend who lives inside a skull. Got my quill. Got them at a jaunty angle, like Frank Sinatra's fedora. And I've got my parchment here for my spells. On the skull, I use absolute positioning. What that does is take it out of the flow of the document. It places exactly where I tell it, and other elements do not try to make space for it. They just pretend it's not there, and the document flows as it normally would. So I do that. I put it over to the right, down a little from the top. The units I'm using here, VW instead of like pixels or something. Anybody know what VW is? It's a percentage of the width of your window. So that's 5% of the width of the window. So it changes depending on how wide my browser viewport area is. This thing's freezing up again.
You can just use a percent sign, right?
You can. That is the percentage of its container. I'm doing the percentage of the entire viewport, which the percent would probably get you exactly the same thing the way it's written right now. But if it were inside something else, oh, come on. Oh my gosh. All right, here we go. Okay, maybe I shouldn't do this. But you get the idea. Then I use a CSS transformation to rotate it 15 degrees. That's that jaunty angle. That's clockwise. Negative to go counterclockwise. I do something very similar with the quill, but I do another little fancy thing. From the top, I don't just say 30 VW, 30% of the width. I say that plus 40 pixels. Basically, I'm making room for some other stuff, for some padding that's there, and so on. And that's the value I found that looks right no matter how wide or narrow the window is. So you can do this. Calc is a super handy thing from recent years. So if you want to do something like add a % to a number of pixels, which is something you want to do sometimes, there is calc to do that with. My H1, I'm not doing anything too fancy, adding some margin left, margin top, margin bottom, setting the color, and I am making it black, but 40% opacity. Not the most readable thing in the world, but it kind of looks like it's burned into the desk. If you want to prioritize usability over looking dumb, I mean cool, knock your stuff out. So I've styled the form, give it some margin, specify its width. Now what's this thing? It's that greater than sign. You remember space between selectors means that the div is inside the form. Greater than sign, that is a child selector. So with the space, it's a descendant, which means it could be one level inside it, or it could be more levels than that, and it will still match. Child selector, the greater than sign, means the div is an immediate child inside the form with nothing else in between. So what I've done here is I haven't done it yet. So this rule isn't being applied. So I think we want to wrap the input and the button inside a div. So I'm going to do it. So now there's a div around it. What's that give me? Well, there's nothing in here yet. Okay. That's not the form anyway. So now these are side by side. That's what it did for me. Now the button, ooh, look at that. Woo! So now these are side by side. That's cool. I have a rule that applies specifically to inputs with a type of text. So inside the brackets here, this is an attribute selector. You can target things not just by class and ID, but by any attribute by doing it this way. If I said just type inside brackets, that would mean any input that has a type attribute at all. If I say input type equals text, then it will target just text type inputs. And there's some fancy stuff going on there. There's a box shadow. There's a transition. That's what makes the hover effect kind of fade in. Feel free to look any of those things up. This is not a CSS class. I'm going through this kind of quickly because, this is not the purpose of the class. But if you want to pick some of this along the way, it's fun. Look stuff up. Learn how to do some stuff yourself. Ooh, input type text : focus. So that's what's called a pseudo class. It's like a class, but it's not a class that you actually specify in the markup. It's a class that sort of gets added automatically when something happens on the page. There's one for hover, for example. There's one for focus. So this means only an input of type text that currently has focus will get these rules. Ordinarily, there was that big blue background around it. That's a little obnoxious and doesn't really go with our theme. So I just put a soft little yellow glow there instead. In several places, then, I'm using Flexbox, which we don't really have time to get into today, for page layout. A lot of rules on our submit button to make it sort of hug the side here. Different background color when you hover over it, pseudo class. And main, we've done some stuff that's kind of fancy. We can talk more about Flexbox later, but again, not a CSS class, not the point. I pasted in all the CSS. I'll paste in all my HTML in Slack as well. Do encourage you to do your own research if you're interested in learning more about how some of these things work. Style the page. Notice there are no bullets here either. I had a list style of none on my list.